Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We have been working through the book of 1 Samuel, and we are about 5 sessions into it. This is, I think, week 6 that we're into this. We're going to be doing 4 chapters, 20 through 23. We're getting close to the end. But man, the narrative, the action, you know, we're really picking up steam here.
Yeah, and last week it was David and Goliath, right? And it was a great story, and we all know it. But there's some good reminders in here, too.
Yeah.
You know, reminders is important because David is the anointed one. David came out as the king's champion and won. And David and God beat Goliath and the Philistines, right? I mean, that's huge. And we saw again and again where Saul was relying on men and David was relying on God. And we're going to continue to see it.
Yeah, and Saul gets jealous, and somehow he's going to find out or start to suspect exactly what Samuel was afraid of. What if Saul finds out that I've anointed David as king? You know, God says, you let me take care of those details. Well, we're finally coming to the point where...
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing for us to think about in our world, too. From the standpoint, David is the anointed one. David is going to be king. His road is not easy.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, last week he climbed out a window, right, to save himself and took off running. Yeah. So, you know, his life is not easy, but just, you know, in our terms, just because we're a Christian doesn't mean our life is going to be easy.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of times it's going to be harder because there's more expectations on us.
Yeah. And
there's change that God wants to make in our lives to make us more useful. But to us, that's pain.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to change.
There are people who used to say, I used to hear people say, you know, the safest place to be is at the center of God's will. Like, I'm not sure that safe is the right word.
Yeah.
I think maybe the most secure place to be, but that's not always safe, as we see here in David's life.
Well, and the easy answer isn't the right one all the time either. So now it's okay, I know I'm a Christian. I'm doing my best to follow God. I have 2 paths. Which one's right?
Yeah.
And, you know, God tells you to go this way. Okay, I'm going that way. Well, that's not the easiest way. Why aren't I going this way?
Yeah.
And it's because we can't see down the road.
Yeah.
You know, we get it, but when you're in the middle of it, man, that's hard. That's way hard.
Well, these next 4 chapters have, I mean, it's narrative. It's an easy read.
Yeah.
You know, and we're not going to tell you, you know, all the stuff that you're going to read. But there's some big topics in here that I think is worth pointing out as we work our way through these chapters.
So. So we start off, David is on the run, and he meets up with Jonathan and says, you know, hey, your dad's trying to kill me. And Jonathan's like, I'm not quite sure about that. So they devise a way to figure it out. Yeah. And again, you can read about this. But there's a couple things in here. One is it keeps David safe, what they come up with, which was paramount to both of them. And then the second one I totally lost on. Notice that they were talking inside, and then they went outside too.
Yeah.
So they're very cognizant of people listening and being there. So they go out in the field. Why are they out in the field? So nobody can be around.
Right.
Right. So they get it. You know, Jonathan especially has grown up. You know, in the, you know, capital and...
Well, and David is trying to convince him, your dad wants me dead. And Jonathan's like, he would have told me. I mean, come on. That's the best that you got.
He did ask him to kill him, but that's beside the point.
Beside the point.
Yeah. So they put the plan in motion. Jonathan learns that his dad is trying to kill David.
Indeed.
And really what David wants to know is, are you still going to be on my side?
Yeah.
Right? Can I trust you?
Yeah.
And so that's what this whole thing is about. And it turns out he can trust Jonathan.
Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan is really stuck in between a rock and a hard place here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he loves his dad. He's committed to his family.
The crown prince?
Yeah. It should be him who's next,
right?
You know, on the throne. But he has decided that David is next. He knows that David is next, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to help David, even against himself. I love verse 33 here in chapter 20, because this is just a great reminder. Yes, this is what happened. You know, the Bible accurately records what happened, but it does not tell us exactly how it happened, right?
Right.
So Jonathan is telling Saul, why are you trying to kill David? You know what? And so Saul threw his spear at Jonathan. We've seen this at David a couple of times now,
now
right?
Jonathan.
In order to strike him down. So I love it. And this is the net translation. I get this. But so Jonathan was convinced that his father had decided to kill David. It's just this sort of nonchalant. So I go, well, okay, maybe he is trying to kill you.
Now I see what he's talking about.
Obviously, there was, a lot of emotion that doesn't come through here. But sometimes we forget that these are real people and, living through their real lives and everything. And the text, we've said this many, many times over the years with our different videos. Even just last week, we jump forward years as we go a couple of verses. Well, here we're missing all the emotion. We're missing, it's just like, so Jonathan decided, maybe he is trying to kill him. Yeah. There was obviously something else going on there.
Yeah. So at this point, David takes off, right? And it's not like he has an entourage. It's David. So he ends up in a small town a couple miles north, and he goes to the priest there, which again, interesting that David goes to the priest, where Saul would have no idea where to go.
Well, and this is the city of priests. Actually, this is one of this.
Nob,
Nob is like probably one of the Levitical cities, right? So it could be a city of refuge potentially, but it was definitely a city of priests.
Okay.
So he knew where he would be able to find hopefully some help, but he's not sure whose side everybody's on.
Right.
Jonathan is the only person he can trust at this point.
Right.
And I think that's a big deal as we go into the city here.
Yeah, so he goes and meets with the priest, Ahimelech, and the priest is shaking with fear. And David's got to figure out, is this guy scared because he thinks I'm going to kill him?
Yeah.
Or is he scared because other people are here going to kill me? He's trying to figure it out. So he's talking with the priest, and the priest is like, okay, I got a guy who's, a general in the army, a high-ranking guy. It's just him.
Yeah. Where's everybody else?
Where's all of his people? And everybody's heard the problems with Saul and David.
Yeah.
What's going on here? And, am I going to get in trouble?
Yeah. Well, and
there's a lot behind the scenes going on here.
Saul obviously doesn't have a lot of respect for the priesthood at this point. He's not, so maybe he's sent David on an assassination mission to take out the priests.
Right.
Which nobody knows.
Which we may see that in a couple chapters.
Well, yeah. That's the thing is that Saul has created an environment where no one trusts anyone.
Right. So David asks for help for him and his men. Right. And there's a discussion.
His men.
Yeah. And there's a discussion going on here. Well, so the question is, does David lie?
Yeah. Well, so here, okay, so I'm quick to say yes, but also I'm quick to say no. So here's my question back to you: is every deception a lie?
If it doesn't come from me, yes.
Well, because there really is an ethical thing here. If every deception is a lie, and we're not supposed to lie, whatever, does that mean I can't throw a surprise party for someone?
Right.
Because I'm intentionally deceiving them. Well, no, you can throw a surprise party. What if I play basketball? Can I I've got the ball and I need to get past the defender. Can I fake him out? That is intentional deception, right? No one's going to call that a lie and say, no, sorry, you can't deceive, you can't fake out the other player. So what's the difference between deception and a lie? It's really context, isn't it?
Right.
Well, the context here is war.
Yeah, David is at war with Saul.
Yeah, well, at the very least, Saul is at war with David, right? He's trying to kill him. David is trying to save his life, and he doesn't know who is his enemy and who's not. Right. So is it okay for him to deceive people while he's trying to save his own life in war? I think yes. I think there's no problem. God never seems to have any problem, never condemns David for this. So I don't have a problem.
It's brought up a couple other times in the Bible, doesn't it?
As far as
reflecting back to this, didn't David? I think maybe they're talking about eating the bread. Which
is another thing. So, but God doesn't have a problem with that either. There's nothing in here that says.
Yeah, sorry, we're talking here. So the idea is the priest is going to help, and David's like, I need some
some
bread.
bread.
I have 5 loaves of bread. So there,
Or whatever you have.
Yes, yeah. So there is holy bread, and is that a problem?
Yeah. So what happens? And this goes all the way back to Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Moses is setting up the tabernacle, and God said, "You're going to have a table just outside the holy place, and every week the priests are supposed to bake 12 loaves of bread. It's called the showbread or the bread of the presence, and place it on the table, and they're going to eat from that." Okay. In ancient cultures, this was very common with the other gods, is that people brought bread and wine to their gods because you have to appease the gods, and so the gods were living off of the people. Well, what the true and living God did is he said, "I'm not eating this. You're going to bake it, and I'm going to give it to you." And there were 12 loaves to represent the 12 tribes and symbolizing God's provision. Well, yeah, the priests are supposed to eat this. Nobody else is supposed to eat this bread. So how does David get away with it? Well, it's actually here in the text because it says
the end of the week, right? Or
it's the end of the week, yeah. So verse 6 says, "It had been removed from before the Lord in order to replace it with hot bread on the day that it had been taken away." This had already been taken out of service. This wasn't the bread. So it had been, consecrated or whatever. And so they actually made a little joke about it. And David's like, "Oh, so all of my stuff is going to be holy if I have this bread." But there's no problems. Yeah. There's no problems with any of this.
All right. So David also needs a weapon, and it just so happens that Goliath's sword was
Which is really interesting. And of course, I'm sure he knew that. I mean, it was his sword. He took
Do you have any
weapons around here? Well, there's Goliath's sword. Perfect.
Yeah, but what I find really funny is, so David takes the sword, takes the bread, and he takes off, and he flees to the king of Gath. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that this is Goliath's hometown.
Yeah.
So a couple things going on here. First, he's out of Israel.
Yeah.
Right? He's in Philistine company now. And it might make sense to flee from Saul.
Yeah.
Right? And get a little breathing room. But at some point, he has to look around and go, probably the wrong place to bring Goliath's sword. And am I in trouble when people recognize who I am?
Yeah. Which they definitely did.
Yep.
And in fact, by this point, they were saying, "Isn't this David the king of the land?" So news has gotten out even into Philistine territory
that this guy's going to be the next king. And also that David killed Saul killed 1,000, David killed tens of thousands.
Yep.
Okay, but David killed tens of thousands Philistines.
Of Philistines, yeah. Yeah, this isn't... Right.
Yeah. So David resorts acting like a madman.
So verse 12 is another one of these nonchalant. So David thought about what they said.
Yeah, I'm in trouble, right? So he starts acting like a madman.
Yeah.
Any precedents here? Or?
I think he's still trying to figure out what to do. He's on the run. He's, still trying to figure out who to trust, who he can't trust. Obviously, the Philistines he can't trust. But now he is in their territory, like you said. So he has to do something, quick thinking. So he runs around like he's out of his mind. He's drooling all over the place. Maybe he wants them to think that he's contagious. So, leave him alone temporarily while they regroup. Give him a chance to, figure something out and get out of there.
Well, it works, right? So he takes off and he hides in some caves. His mother, father, family know where he's at, so they come. And then I guess I'll call them political outcasts.
Yeah.
Other people come also that are against Saul,
Yep.
aren't fitting in.
They were in trouble. They owed someone money. They were discontented.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a pretty good
It's a
group.
great army. But now David has 400 people.
Yeah.
So now he's got
starting
something.
to get...
And 5 loaves of bread.
Well, but
He's already ate those. But.
Now you're starting to see a civil war.
Right.
Right? Because these are Israelites who are siding with David against Saul. Now you're starting to see not just Jonathan taking sides, but Israel taking sides.
Israel.
Yeah.
Right. So David takes his mother and father into Moab for safety.
Now this is interesting because Moab, right? Moab is on the other side. It's modern day Jordan. Okay. On the other side of the Dead Sea, so opposite. So if this is Israel, and here's the Mediterranean Sea, we got Philistine land over here. Today we would call it Gaza.
Right.
Okay. In fact, Gaza City was named in here. Gaza. You go all the way to the other side, and here's Moab over here on the other side of the Dead Sea. Right. Moab comes from Abraham's nephew Lot and one of his sons. Okay. But what's interesting is David's great grandmother, assuming the genealogy at the end of Ruth is intact and there's no gaps. David's great grandmother was Ruth. She was from Moab.
So going back home to
so
their
this is
roots.
sort of like, because his grandfather, if the genealogy is intact, David's grandfather was Ruth's son. So did he go to Moab specifically with his father and mother?
Right.
And say, let's find some family. I'm going to the king. We have some family ties here. Can you protect them while I'm doing battle with,
Right.
It's just really interesting that he chose Moab instead of some of the other places around. That's my speculation, but it just seems to be interesting.
Yeah. Saul by now knows that David is running away, and he of course is trying to find him, and so he complains to his soldiers that they're siding with David.
Yeah.
And instead of him
now paranoid.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Now he's paranoid on top of everything,
and he has a history of throwing spears. So Saul actually had a servant that saw David when David was with the priest.
Yeah.
This guy speaks up. Hey, I saw David.
I know where he is.
And Saul immediately thinks these priests are now on David's side.
Yep.
They gotta go.
Yep.
So he sends this. He ends up sending a bunch of people, but this guy ends up killing 85 priests, and then along with men, women, children, oxen, and donkeys.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Saul looks at his guys and he says, "Kill the priests," and they're all like, "No, that's a step too far, man.
We've been told that's not good."
Yeah, I mean, we're with you, King, and everything, but we can't do that. So not only is there a civil war between Saul and David, and they're men now, but there's a civil war in hearts. This whole Saul is completely destroying Israel from the inside out. Right. Philistines are looking in from the outside, just laughing.
Yeah, well, let's take a break. Interesting. When David heard this news, he blamed himself.
Yeah.
And actually shows up in one of the Psalms written by David. So Psalm 52, if you read the first part, it's the same guy, the Doeg. In there, and it's when Doeg killed the priests. Yeah. And David blames himself.
Well, yeah, because he knew he was there.
He's definitely blaming Saul, and he's definitely blaming other people, but he felt that he could do more.
Well, he said, I saw him there, and I should have known he was going to go back to Saul, and this is what was going to happen. Yeah. But this is one of those places where the psalm title actually connects to a place that we see right in here. It doesn't happen all the time, but this is one where we can place it. It's like, this is when David wrote Psalm 52. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. So David's still on the run. He's trying to figure out what to do. He keeps asking God, which is great. Yeah. Saul, on the other hand, is relying on men to talk to men to find out where David is. Yep. So he's always lagging behind and getting there. David asking God, should I do this? Should I do that? It seems like that part was driving Saul crazy. Yeah. Right? And it was just feeding into where he's going. So David delivers some of his countrymen from the Philistines, and he ends up in an exposed area, and Saul and his men are coming. And so David asks God, is Saul coming? Will this town give me up? And God answers yes to both those questions. Yep. Right? So David leaves. Mm-hmm.
Which means that neither one of those things happens.
Right. I was going to give you credit. Right. So God didn't answer right.
Yeah, or to spin around, was God wrong? Yeah. Because God said, yes, this will happen.
Didn't happen.
And it didn't happen. Right. I love this account. I really love this because this helps us understand a little bit of what omniscience means. Most people think of omniscience, God knows everything. or
Right.
God knows what's going to happen. It's far bigger than that. Omniscience means God knows everything, both real and possible. Right, we live in a world now where, the Marvel universe has multi-universes and alternate
Right.
universes and all this other stuff, right? Well, there's a very much a reality where God knows the outcome of every decision that never gets made.
Right.
That all of the things that never actually come to pass, God knows them. What David asked was, if I go down there, will they turn me over to Saul? God says, yes, they will. So David did something else.
Right.
Was God wrong? He was absolutely right. That's what would have happened. And so it also teaches us and reminds us that we have freedom of choice, that God expects us to do our due diligence, to ask him for wisdom, for all these other things, to look at all the information and then make a wise decision. God said, they will turn you over to Saul. David said, that's probably not the best idea then. Let's go off in a different direction. And God ended up actually blessing that because he worked to get Saul off of David's tail temporarily.
Yep.
As we come down toward the end of the chapter. I really, really like this because it doesn't show us that God is wrong. It shows us that God entrusts decisions and we pay the consequences, good or bad, for our decisions.
Yep. So this chapter ends with David in the desert, Saul still pursuing him and getting close, and it looks like this is going to be the end for David.
Yep.
But then Saul has to return to Israel because the Philistines are attacking.
Yeah. Why would they attack at just that moment? Right.
Yeah, just a God thing.
Yeah, God somehow incited them. We're not told how or why, or we know why. God incited them to attack at that time. It got Saul off of David's back, gave him a little bit of breathing room, and God rescues David by using the Philistines.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, how cool is that?
That is way cool. Yeah, and a great place to end. So we're going to end with David, safe for now, in the desert. 400 people on his side.
And he went up, the very last verse, he went up from there and stayed in the strongholds of En-Gedi, which is an oasis. And so it was a good place of rest, a good place of respite. He likes En-Gedi. He finds himself there regularly because it was a fortress. He was able to find a place to defend himself, and there was water and not pine, but trees with fruit and stuff in it. It's actually a really good place for him to hole up. Good. So nice. He likes En-Gedi. So hopefully you found some of these things really interesting, some tidbits that we brought out, some things to think about too, as we see God at work in what could easily be just, read a couple of stories over the week and, move past them. Let's think about what's really happening here and how God is working. And I think we can grow because of it. So hopefully you found this encouraging and insightful. Share this with other people whom you think can find the same things. And we will see you back here, and we'll pick up in chapter 24 next time.
Sounds good. Bye, everybody.